Once again, welcome everyone. My name is Luisa Gui, and I'm spearheading the alumni relations efforts here at AFS-USA, alongside my partner.
Hi everybody, my name is Minella and I'm an alumni relations coordinator here at AFS-USA.
Great, thank you for joining us today for our AFS-USA alumni webinar on the Global Seal of Biliteracy, hosted by Linda Egnatz. Linda will be introduced by Jill Warner. Jill is our AFS-USA Director of Educational Outreach. So I'm going to pass on the word to Jill. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. It is with sincere pleasure that I have the opportunity to introduce a colleague of mine. Linda Egnatz has been a Spanish teacher most of her career, and most notably, she has received multiple recognitions for her outstanding service as an educator. And so both as the ACTFL Teacher of the Year, and ACTFL is the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. It's the entity that helps provide professional development for world language educators across the country and beyond. And also as a Golden Apple Teacher of Excellence Award winner. You know, Linda has been recognized for her outstanding service just as a teacher and as a educator for world languages in general. And it has also done tremendous service in her home state of Illinois to share with language teachers there. And during her time as the ACTFL Teacher of the Year, one of the primary platforms that she shared with the country and with world language teachers around was the idea that students who, and learners in general, who have taken on the skill building of learning another language should be recognized and credentialed for that talent, just as if they were, you know, having and learning any other skill out in the field. And so it's with that piece that Linda has moved into a new role regarding the Global Seal of Biliteracy, and she will share lots of information with us about that. And help you figure out how you can be a part of this and get your own language skills credentialed as well after having had an AFS experience abroad where you acquired some of those skills. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Linda, and she's going to describe what all of these great things are. And I'll be here to monitor the chat box and answer questions for everyone and be able to help wrap it up at the end as well. So thank you, and on to you, Linda.
Well, thank you very much, Jill. What a great introduction. I sound really important. But really what I'm here about is just really to share with all of you an opportunity to sort of raise your own visibility and your sort of highlight those skills that you have acquired through your study abroad and hopefully in ongoing language learning since your return. And so with that, I'll just sort of launch into today's webinar, which is about the seal of biliteracy. Specifically, we're going to share about the global seal, but as a way of introduction, I want to share with you a little bit about what has happened thus far. So in a seal of biliteracy, by definition, is a recognition that's being awarded to certify language skills in 2 or more languages. In the United States, with all of the states that have adopted a program for the most part, their public high school seniors, one of those languages needs to be English. However, in the state of Hawaii, it might actually be Hawaiian and another language. And the seal then is now began in 2011 in the state of California, followed by the state of New York, and then my own state, number 3, the state of Illinois. But since that time, it has really gained momentum and has been really a way that not only state departments of education, but actually state legislatures that have passed the law in each state as a way to recognize language learning are really saying that language learning is important and that your skill is not only valuable and marketable, but it's also one that is needed in the United States. And so with that, states have adopted a program whereby they are recognizing their seniors in public high school when they graduate on their diploma, oftentimes as well on their transcripts, with what's called a state seal of biliteracy. Each state has its own unique program, and you can see from the different logos here that each state oftentimes has its own emblem as well. And so the programs are very diverse, and they really do reflect the needs and the demographics oftentimes of the states in which they are. And this became sort of a real exciting piece for me as I worked with my own language learners as a Spanish teacher in the classroom, that when all of a sudden there was something that recognized your skills, the value of those skills became more important, not just to the student, but to their parents, certainly to administration, but most importantly, to where the student wanted to take those skills, whether it was to a university for advanced placement or college credit, or right into the workforce as a way to really proclaim what they were able to do. And with that, we decided what will that do? And really what the seal does is, because in most states it's acquired through taking an external test, it can provide proof that as a document, as a certification, that almost like a license that you have plumbing skills, or that you have passed the, another kind of test for a particular kind of career field, whether it's in medicine or law or any other trade, to say that your skill set is of a high level. And so this level is determined via testing, aligned to ACTFL and its proficiency scale. And Jill mentioned a little bit earlier that that's the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. And what they have done is they have created we're going to kind of talk a little bit about it, a cone shape that represents language learning. And so at the very, very bottom of that cone is sort of your very first exposure to language learning at what we refer to as the novice level. So at that point, it's very much memorized. So you've learned how to greet someone, and you can tell someone your name, and you can probably count to 10, and you may be able to identify and order a few items off of a menu. And so it begins at a very low level, but as you acquire more vocabulary and more skills and use that vocabulary in more ways, and you begin to sort of mix and match what you know, your level of skill increases. And so this cone is shaped sort of as upside down ice cream, or as an ice cream cone or an upside down cone, to show that growth. And as you go up through the cone levels of proficiency, each one tends to take a little bit longer than the one prior to be able to move up into those different levels. And so we're going to use that cone as sort of that basis of how do we measure language, because you don't either have nothing or all that you need to know about a language. A language is dynamic, vocabulary continues to grow, but also your exposure to that language and how often you have an opportunity to practice it, and your own skill set. So we're going to talk about those things, but that all is represented by what we refer to as an ACTFL proficiency level. And so you see those levels in there. The global seal is similar to those state seals that some of those departments of education and legislatures have passed in 38 different states now. Only it takes this concept and expands it to anyone who has a language skill that's valuable and they would like to sort of demonstrate that skill, whether it's for an academic purpose or for an employer. And so you don't have to be a high school senior in a public school that's adopted the program to participate in the Global Seal of Biliteracy. You just have to demonstrate your language skill. And we do that through some proficiency criteria that I'll explain in a little more detail shortly. And there are 3 different levels that are recognized along this pathway. So you don't have to know everything right away. You have a sort of an onboarding that you can begin with. Perhaps it was your experience in high school or middle school learning the language. You had your study abroad, and now perhaps you might be actually using that language in a work situation or socially or occasionally when you get to travel again. And so as you acquire that skill, your level might be increasing. And so we measure those skills through externally validated testing. So these are national exams, sort of like an ACT or SAT exam or an AP exam. Perhaps you may have taken one of those that measure the amount of language and what you're able to do with it. The Global Seal will provide you with a transcript to document those skills, so you can take that to an employer or to an academic institution to show a competency in the language. The tests that we use and qualify for the program are determined by an independent board of advisors of national language experts in the field. And as I mentioned earlier, the program's available to high school, college, and adult learners. So it doesn't matter how you learned your language or where, but just that you can currently demonstrate those skills. And so you'll see by this map that these are states where at this point in time, the Global Seal, which is a relatively new program that was launched in 2018, has already issued awards or has applications in process. Those would be those sort of yellow states. But in addition to the United States, we also are working internationally, worked with the government Department of Education in Mexico, and currently are working to provide some credentials in some other countries as well. So you don't have to be in the United States to qualify. You don't have to be in any particular state, but this gives you an idea how the scope and the scale of the Global Seal. You'll notice to the right that there's a little bit of swag available in addition to the personalized certificate and credential that everyone would receive for free. We do offer some other ways that someone might celebrate through a medal, for example, at a program. But I personally wear the pin, the little lapel pin that's at the bottom of the screen. And it's a way to identify you as a bilingual and as a language user. And so we have those at each of our award levels as well. And so I'd like to kind of explain to you what that is that you would actually receive. So after that testing, which I'll describe in a little more detail, you actually receive a certificate that sort of identifies your level of what we refer to as fluency, your level of skill. It's going to identify you as functionally fluent, as having working fluency, or professional fluency. It will identify the languages in which you have certified. Some start with, if English is your home language, your dominant language, that might be listed first. But if you come from another language culture background, you may find that English is actually your second language. There is no limit to how many tests and languages in which you can certify, but each certificate identifies just 2. Your name obviously is going to be included here, the date, and then where it says your school, organization, or company, that's a program that AFS-USA is going to be offering to you, and they will actually be listed there. So that was another way to sort of celebrate your participation as an alum. And the unique serial number is something that's very special because it's going to identify this as your unique credential. No one else will have that particular number or that particular group of letters or context. And this allows the certificate to actually be used as a license and as a credential, and it can be sort of transcripted later on. And so how do you get this Global Seal of Biliteracy? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you have to take a test. We offer a variety of tests from different companies that we have, our Board of Advisors has determined as a test that qualifies to measure not what you know. These are not grammar tests. These are not vocabulary list tests. These are actually tests that allow you to demonstrate comprehension of what you listen to or what you read, as well as what you can say and what your speaking ability as well as your writing ability. And so these this particular list of language test is right on our website, theglobalseal.com. And if I were to click on any one of those green test names, it would take me to more specific information about that particular test, about what languages that test might be offered in, what the cost is, how do I contact the company, how long does the test take. Each test is a little bit unique, a little bit different, and some tests are as low, are less expensive than others. To the right, you're going to see the score that you would need to acquire on that particular test to qualify at the Functional Fluency Award level or at the Working Fluency Award level. There is a separate chart on our website for the Professional Fluency, that higher level of score. And so everyone would qualify on one of these particular tests. Now at this point, some of you, if you may already have taken one of these tests, because the AP College Board Advanced Placement Test is also one of those qualifying tests. The Global Seal will recognize a test up to 12 months. So if you actually took an AP test in the past year, in the past summer, you could actually already perhaps qualify for one of our 2 award levels here using the AP test. So that's one way to find a test. Some of you may say, well, what about my language? So another way to find your test is actually on our website, theglobalseal.com. There's also a languages page. You'll see that sort of a screenshot of that page to the left, and you'll see that over 100 languages are listed here. And these languages, everything from the typical, very popular Spanish all the way to some less common European languages such as Polish, but also some languages that you might find or maybe have never ever heard of. And so these are all languages that we can certify you and credential you in. If you click on the language, which I've done with Vietnamese, you'll see the screenshot here that will tell you more about the test in Vietnamese. And it will also give you an image of each of the test companies that offer a test in the language that you've chosen. You click on any one of those logos and you'll be taken to more information about that particular test in that language. And so I wanted to kind of, if you've never taken a proficiency test, or maybe you've taken an AP test, but it's been some time, I wanted to kind of share with you a little bit about what a proficiency test might look like. This is just one of the examples. This happens to be our most popular test that's taken for the Global Seal presently. And I have 3 screenshots here. Over on the left, you'll see the way that the test is made up of. And this is a test that's delivered completely online. There is no time limit, but it suggests about 2 hours. I think 2 to 3 hours is probably the most common. It does allow you to do some editing and to record or to re-record if you want to make your presentation better. But you'll see that there are different prompts at each of the levels. And the way this particular test works is it starts with giving you a reading test, and then based on your reading level, it sort of guesses. It's actually a very high-powered computer AI sort of algorithm that's going to determine what writing prompts level you should be at. And it does the same thing with listening and speaking. There's a screenshot of the listening exam. So each of the listening or the reading, in addition to hearing what you're going to be listening to, you'll see that there are to the right some multiple choice questions. And those questions, the difficulty depends on what level you might be at. This particular test is computer adaptive. So if you answer correctly, the questions will continue to get a little bit harder. If you miss a question, they will stay the same. If you miss more than one, maybe the questions will scale down to something a little bit easier. So it allows you to do the very best without feeling stressful as the computer is adapting to your own particular skill level. On the right, you see what that score report is that it would look like. And this is a very kind of typical score report in the sense that very few people have the exact same skill level in each of their skill areas. And so we're going to look at another piece to kind of show you a little bit more about that. But it's not uncommon that your reading skill might be higher than your speaking skill, for example. In fact, that's actually the norm for most of us. Think about your experience learning your first language as a child. You understood mom a lot sooner than you were able to respond back to mom. And it's sort of the same kind of thing here. And so what we see with this particular school report is not only an assessment on the left with a description of what your skill level is, but most of these proficiency tests will also give you an idea of what to work on next. And I know that's something that our moderator, Jill Warner, is already thinking about in ways that how might AFS support you if you maybe don't, you hit it in 3 of the 4 categories, but you need a little extra support in that 4th category. And so that's something that I can't wait to hear a little bit more about, and I hope you will too. So again, everything is based on this sort of cone. You'll see that these little topics or little sort of samples were at the novice, the intermediate, the advanced level. And so what these tests will measure is, most importantly, they'll measure what you comprehend. What is it that you understand when you listen to something or when you read something? And again, there's not a time limit, so most of these tests allow you to read something or listen to it even more than once if that's something that you need to do. And it's basically at your level. It also measures your production, or what can you create on your own. So for example, in the writing, it might be a few sentences, it might be a paragraph, maybe it's an email. For speaking, you'll be asked to talk about a topic, or maybe you might have a conversation. It depends on the test that you select. But what the test is going to measure, or how you score higher on the test, is I've sort of given a few little hints at the bottom here, is the quantity and the quality of your vocabulary. How much can you say? If everything is pretty repetitive and there's not a lot of variety, your vocabulary score might bring you down a little bit. But if you've used, let's say, a lot of length and organization, you've got maybe an introduction to your little paragraph and a conclusion, and complexity. So instead of saying that I liked my trip abroad, you say I liked my trip abroad because I learned so much about the culture and the people who live there. And so you are able to give some supporting points, and that complexity and sort of length of sentence, all of those things are ways to contribute to a higher level. The other piece that's very helpful is that before you take any of these test companies do offer some practice tests on their website, so you can get some confidence in terms of the format of the test and how the test works, so that you're not nervous, because an online test might feel a little bit scary, but most students and most test takers that I know actually kind of think it's more fun than the traditional, certainly more fun than the traditional, let's fill in and color in little black circles on a Scantron. So I think that would be something that you would want to do, is certainly to try the sample test that the company might offer. Always use your best and your most complete language when you take a proficiency test. Sometimes, especially if you are very comfortable in the language, or it's maybe a heritage language that you've spoken as a child, you tend to just sort of be lazy. If someone asks me, hi, how am I probably will say fine, which will not give me a very high score. So I might need to say, great, I'm doing some really interesting things at work, and I began to expand on that concept and that idea to support my ideas. One of the things that I shared just a few minutes ago was that it would be unusual for everyone to have the same strength in each of the skill areas. So I just pulled out a little sample score report. Notice that some over on the right, for the length of time, there was some people that took more than 3 hours, and one person that took 158 minutes. So everyone is kind of different depending upon their comfort level and their skill set, but there isn't, in this particular test, a time limit that you have to complete it in. But there is just sort of a suggested, it's about that 2-hour to 3-hour length. But you'll notice also that on the left, I've circled the reading scores. Everyone scored their highest in reading, and that's just real common. Their speaking score, for most everyone, was one of their lower scores, and you'll see that as well. And then we see the writing and the listening are usually fall in the middle, although for some individuals, if they've spent a lot of time speaking and traveling, and maybe they have family or friends, or it's a heritage language, their speaking level might be much higher and their writing score might be lower. And so we also see that situation. And so what's interesting about taking a proficiency test is you do learn about your strengths and your weaknesses in the language, and it gives you sort of a little bird's eye view of like, okay, that's the area where I really need to focus and I really need to concentrate. And you'll already probably get a sense of that when you take a practice test. But what's exciting is when you finally get to the place where you reach an award level in all, you've qualified in each of the skill areas, which is one of the global skill requirements. You'll find that, for example, these students who've qualified in the speaking at that functional fluency, every one of them is already at the working fluency in reading, and some of them are there in their writing and listening as well. And so it gives you the idea that it is a pathway, and you can continue to sort of level up as you go along. So here's what that pathway looks like. So at the intermediate mid-level, we have our first entry-level award, and we use the word functional fluency for that. And it is, and I'm going to kind of describe what that person can do in a few minutes, but it's the first place where you really can interact with native speakers. It might not be easy, it might not be simple, but you can get the job done. You'll be able to order in the restaurant, you'll be able to complete your purchase, you'll be able to help someone find the bathroom, you'll be able to do some basic sort of introduce yourself. You have some of those tasks that you can do, but you're still using some very basic language and probably a lot of memorized language that you have acquired along the way, and you're going to get tired out. Probably you're not going to sustain it for very long. And then we see our working fluency, which is where, in fact, most language educators are certified to teach a language classroom at that working fluency level. But if you have taken an AP test and scored a 5 on that test, you're right there along with the teacher, which is pretty exciting, actually. And then we have our professional fluency, or our highly proficient. And what this looks like here is really the idea of using the word fluency. And the reason when we think about why knowing your level is important is because if you're going to articulate in the employment world what it is you can do, different levels of fluency can do different things in the workplace. But there is a place for each of those 3 levels. And your level then sort of describes what you can do. And we use that word fluency because that's sort of the question I always get when I'm traveling or I'm meeting people and they find out I speak a language. They might want to ask me, well, are you fluent? And I know certainly as a classroom language teacher, all of the things that I don't know, so I would hesitate to say I'm fluent because that sounds perfect, but there are gradients, and so that's why we've created the functional fluency, the working fluency, and the professional fluency, because it's going to describe what we can do. This chart will kind of help you visualize that a little bit. So again, you'll notice that on the left, the levels reflect that actual proficiency level cone we described earlier. And it talks about and describes a little bit about what each person can do. But if we look at that first level of functional fluency, these are the kinds of tasks that someone might be able to do using that much language. They could be a sales clerk, they could be a cashier or a receptionist. At this particular level, they could actually be a tour guide, which sounds very high, like I must have to know an awful lot. But actually, as a tour guide, you tend to do a lot of repetitive language. You have sort of a script that you memorize, And tourists always ask the same questions. And so you actually can, this is a job that you could actually do and maybe work at a national park that has international tours. But it is at that first entry level of functionality. Our working fluency at that advanced low level is a little bit different. Notice it can be a language teacher in a classroom, but you can be a nurse. One of the tasks of this particular level is you can use past time frames. So if you're a nurse, you might have to ask, you know, what did you swallow? How did you get hurt? But as well as some other kinds of questions. And notice that there's other customer service representatives, you know, what happened? How did your refrigerator break? You know, when did you buy it? So we have some other kinds of questions. And then we see at that advanced high level, now we're talking about people who are doing financial services, marketing managers, military linguists, and translation officers. And so we have these levels of language that each one has a skill that there's a place that you can serve using your language, even in the workforce. And this is a study that was recently finished or released this last summer that just shows how much need there is in the United States domestically for people with language skills. Notice that Spanish is the one that's in the most demand, and some of you probably have traveled to a Spanish-speaking country. You may have some of those skills that someone might need. We see something called pay differentials, where people are paid a little bit more. For example, in the state of California, if you use a language other than your own language 10% of the time, there's $100 more a month on a state salary. But we see some pay differentials going much higher, which I will also share with you. And so we see some of these pieces that came from this survey of 1,200 different companies, large and small, of different styles and types across the country. 9 out of 10 said that they rely on someone with language skills, even if it's to help someone fill out a form. I had the opportunity to help my sister-in-law do that just Sunday morning. She works for H&R Block, and in came someone who needed some assistance with their tax forms. But what's more important, that companies say that that demand is increasing, that 56% say they will need it in the next 5 years. And this might surprise you that the #1 service department that needs language skills is customer service. But so does IT. Think about all those people trying to figure out how to use their latest cell phone, or people that are trying to determine, think of, you hear about Amazon and Siri and all the different languages. So there's a lot of needs there. And there is a skills gap. In fact, 1 in 4 employers said they actually lost business because they didn't have language skills. This might mean that they couldn't serve part of their community. They couldn't get a new supplier. It limits what they can do when we are in a country where there is so many different languages being spoken. So we see lots of information here that provides a wide variety of careers that use languages. For example, construction uses it a lot. We all are probably aware of hospitality and travel, but also healthcare, education services, even in manufacturing and trade. Everyone said that there was a need for language skills. So really, there's a place for you to find a fit for whatever language level of skill that you have somewhere. And it might pay. This comes from ZipRecruiter. And in ZipRecruiter, if you enter in a particular career, and then you ended, which I did here for nurse, and then enter in bilingual, in this case nurse, you'll notice that they provide me with some national averages of salary. And there is always a range depending on the demographic and location where you live. But the average salary was almost $30,000 difference if I could document that I have bilingual skills as a nurse. So again, that could be a very powerful tool in a career setting. That's also true in pharmacies as well as in other sort of medical fields. And so the Global Seal wants to help you enhance your profile. And one of the ways that we do that is through that serial number that I mentioned earlier. So you can actually go into LinkedIn and some of the other job search sites where you're creating an online digital profile. And by entering in that credential number, in this particular young lady, this is entered in hers, and Annabella, and she entered it in Chinese, where she earned functional fluency, and in Spanish, where she earned her working fluency. And so this was one of the ways that for her, she not only highlighted profile, but it was the difference that took her off the wait list and got her admitted into Cornell University. University students are also getting the Global Seal because there's not a limit to age. This is from the University of Oregon, 232 students, including Anna Cecilia here, who got a Global Seal in working fluency for both French and in Italian. But she's already got job offers lined up, and when she added her credential, that made a difference. She got a lot more interest. And so when we see the idea of how the document sometimes can speak for you, makes it easier to talk about what you can do. For those of you that would like college credit to go along with your language skills, we also offer that in a program with Southern New Hampshire University. And it is transferable, so you can actually take that transcript to any other university. And that's exciting if you've gotten a language skills that's not offered in a traditional classroom. So perhaps you have those Polish skills or Tagalog because you spent time in the Philippines, you can actually get a credential and some college credit in that language that you acquired while studying abroad. For some of you, the Global Seal might mean a scholarship because, again, it's a way to highlight how you stand out. For this young man, it was with Michigan State University and almost a $4,000 scholarship for just our entry-level award of functional fluency in Spanish. It can help you get noticed when you add a documentation, a language credential to your resume or to your CV. And a good example is this young lady, Taylor Doyle, who has been using her language skills as a way to highlight her experiences working with NGOs. And the more she works with them, then the greater her skill has become. And so that's another way. You've done the study abroad, but there's also internship programs. There are a lot of different interesting work opportunities where a language skill might be the differentiating factor between you and another candidate. And that's exactly what happened to Zubair here, who is an immigrant from India, spoke Urdu, arrived about the age of 10 in the United States, learned English, and then had the opportunity to learn Spanish actually in my classroom. And he used his language skills to differentiate himself in the medical field. Him earn an internship with a county medical clinic, and then when he was applying for medical schools, it became a part of his, he added that very prominently in his CV and his resume, and in every interview for med school, he was asked about his language. And the comments were made, well, that's going to really help you. And he had no problem getting into school as a result. This is Trish Dijon, and she's just using her language for fun. She has been learning Italian. She did a study abroad, and then she takes a trip to Italy anytime she can save up enough money. That's the way she shared it with me. And she said it's so much more fun. Every time she goes, she's got a little bit more that she can say. And so it doesn't have to be necessarily for work, but sometimes it's just a really good, personal goal that you set for yourself of, not only do I have this language, but I want to know how good I am, and maybe I can level up with all of the programs and things that we have available to us to do that. So if you're interested in the Global Seal, I want to share a little bit about next steps. I mentioned earlier, our steps are fairly simple. AFS will apply on your behalf, and you will test on your own behalf, and then you will receive that credential. And the Global Seal is actually free, does not include the cost of testing, but it's actually free to you as a service that we're excited to share with you. And I'm going to turn the webinar now back over to Jill, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the plans that AFS has for you.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to pause us for a second and have Manila pop up some poll questions for everyone so we can see kind of where everyone lands in their knowledge and goals and desires related to credentialing and so on. And then Linda and I will be able to share a few things based on what we learned from your answers to these questions. So those poll questions should be popping up on your screen. So I believe there are 5 of them. Some of them are yes or no, so they shouldn't take too long. This is also a good time after, if you answer the questions faster than others, to drop any questions that you have in the chat box.
Attendees are viewing and responding to the questions.
Awesome.
We have about 30% in now.
Okay.
Great, almost 50.
Awesome. So we'll give maybe another minute or so. So the poll questions should automatically just have appeared on your screen if you are logged in with a computer.
%60 now.
Okay.
And climbing up.
All right, we've got a couple of people who say that the questions don't pop up. Don't stress. It's just a kind of an information gathering piece for Linda and I, and for Manila and Luisa, just so we can, you know, see if this is something that helps, you know, if this is something that you truly see as a value to your current employment and so on and so forth. So.
Great, with 65%, we can also quickly read the question. Did you learn or improve upon your second or third language in your AFS experience? Do you still find opportunities to use your second and third language skills? And moving on.
Do you know, or did you know prior to this call that you could get language credentials based on different levels of ability and fluency? Prior to this call, oh, well, not prior to this call, but would having a documented language certification be a positive addition to your CV, resume, or even your job profile? And the last question that we ask is, prior to this call, did you know that pay differentials for individuals with, that they exist for individuals with certified language skills?
Great, we are 66. So let's end the polling.
Yep.
And share results.
Okay, so 88% of the people on the call learned their second or third language through their AFS experience. That's awesome.
That's really awesome.
Do you still find opportunities to use them? And 62% of you say yes, weekly.
Wow.
That's exciting.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, and so I mean, everybody seems to use them at least occasionally, with the exception of 3% that say rarely. So those are great numbers there. Prior to this call, did you know that you could get language credentials based on your different levels of ability and fluency? And over 74% of the attendees on the call said no, they did not know. So we're glad you're here, and we're glad you're part of this conversation with us today. So now that you do know that, and we're going to give you a little more information here in the next few minutes. 91% of you are confirming exactly what Linda shared with us on the call, which is that having that documented language certification, that credential, would be a positive addition to your CV. And we're almost even Steven here with the knowing that pay differentials existed. So I think we can go ahead and kind of close that poll question. And so to talk a little bit about AFS's role in the Global Seal of Biliteracy for our returnee and alumni network, a couple of things for you is that, as Linda mentioned, if you do have a test that you took, if you're a very recent returnee, for example, and you took an AP test or some sort of language proficiency assessment last school year or sometime last summer, or even this past fall, then you still fit within having that assessment completed within the past 12 months. And so you will be able to apply for that certification through AFS right away. So that's something we're going to be able to do very quickly because that assessment was already taken. If you're not associated with a school or university that is offering this testing, then you have to bear with AFS for just a little bit longer as we put together those final pieces to open the doors to assessing your language credentials as an individual. Because most of the assessment companies and programs, they operate for the most part with schools and with universities. And so we are a bit of a newcomer to those organizations when it comes to how our network and how our organization works. But we are hoping to have everything kind of tied up with a pretty bow on it for our entire alumni network by summer. So you can start planning ahead. And one of the things Linda mentioned earlier was that I was going to give you some ideas on how you can beef up those language skills a little bit if you want to think about either leveling up or at least, you know, reigniting those language skills if you haven't necessarily used them for a while. Sounds like most of you use them on a fairly regular basis, so you may not need some of these ideas, but just in case. You know, having an AFS experience is certainly something that if you connected with a host family, this might be that reminder to rekindle that relationship, get back in touch with your host family, and I would encourage you to do so in the target language, so that you're revisiting that. If you think that your written skills are the ones that are more difficult or that are less developed, then send them emails and text messages or WhatsApp messages or even a WeChat. And just check in with them, see how they're doing, and share a little bit how you are doing and what's going on in your life, and reignite that conversation with them. If what you feel is less developed are your verbal skills, then send them a Skype message or a FaceTime or something where you have the opportunity to speak live with them to practice your skills in that regard. Another, and of course, I don't think this will come to any surprise to anyone in our alumni network when I say this, but you could consider hosting a student for the next fall. And now is the time, of course, to start that. Anytime is the time to start that application to be a host parent. But it can be a great opportunity when they are learning English. There are always those awkward and uncomfortable situations where they don't know the word for something, and so you can help them practice, and so on and so forth. You can always volunteer with AFS to be a liaison or just help with orientations or any volunteer capacity, even preparing our students who are about to go abroad to the country where you studied abroad, and engage with those students in the target language and share stories with them and remind yourself of what you can do in the language by just retelling some of those stories and re-engaging with some of those experiences that you had. And of course, if you're really a go-getter and you have time on your hands and your schedule aligns with that of a school, it's always a good idea to reach out to a local school and offer to start a club or be a co-sponsor of a language club where maybe that language is not offered in the local school, but you may find that there are students in the local community who might share a similar interest with you. And so that's something you can do to get involved in your local community. So those are just a few ideas on how to help you rekindle your language skills and get started, and of course stay connected with us at AFS. And as far as the testing protocol that we'll have in place for everyone, We should hopefully have that in place for everyone by, I'm hoping for early summer, but if it's July, please be patient with us as we are a new type of organization to the assessment companies. So I'm going to turn it back to Linda in case there's anything she wants to share, and then we're going to open it up because we have plenty of questions that are coming in through the chat box and through the Q&A. So Linda, if there's anything else you want to share, and then we'll open it up to questions.
No, that's great. I'm excited to work with AFS and to, I'm really blown away by how many of you are using your language skills regularly. That is exciting. So I'd love to hear some of those stories about how you're using your language. I'm sure Jill would as well.
Yeah, please share. Those are great, great things to know about, and to know that language really is having an impact on your current work. So we're going to dive into some of the questions that you guys have been asking. So John asked a question that I did provide a very brief answer in the chat box, but Linda, I didn't know if you wanted to add to this. He asked to what extent the global seal of biliteracy is consonant with the European levels of competency.
That's a really great question, because the ACTFL scale does not actually line up or correlate exactly with the CEFR or the European Common Framework. And so we look at the ACTFL, there are sort of 9 different gradient levels, all totaled. And when we look at the CEFR, there are only 6. So they don't quite match up, but they're somewhat similar. And actually, probably by summer, we will be working with some of the European tests to offer a global seal that's based on the CEFR scale. But that's not yet finalized, but that is something that's also in the works. So there is certainly a parallel, but it isn't an exact correlation.
Okay. So the next question I saw here, we've got lots of comments and thank yous, and we're happy to see those. Do you have a global seal of biliteracy for Thai and English?
Yes.
Okay, there's an easy one.
Yes, it was.
So Jill, will AFS contact the returnees about this? Yes, I mean, just like you learned about this webinar through the Alumni Network newsletter, we will do the same thing. And Manella and Louisa will work on what mechanisms and avenues for communication with the returnees are available to be able to communicate this to them. We are recording this webinar, so we will make the recording available as well. So there will be lots of pieces and communications that will be coming out about this as we get to the point of having the assessment mechanisms worked out completely. The next question is, how long does it take to receive the results of the test?
That will depend a little bit on the language you choose there, because not all of the languages, all 100+ languages are available in every test. But the most common languages and the most common tests that we would be looking at, probably the neighborhood of about 40 or 50 common languages, those test results are usually back within 7 to 10 days. And then our process to actually have the certificate in your hand is another about 7 to 10 days.
Yep, and we'll have to add a few days to that from the AFS piece of that to be able to get the certificate to you, because the Global Seal is accustomed to working with group entities where all of the test takers are in one place, like a school, where they can just have the student come pick up the certificate from the main office or something like that. So we will have a kind of a little bit of a different process at AFS to be able to get that certificate to you. So, I mean, plan for, a few 7 to 10 days to get the assessments, and then probably add a few weeks to that to get the certificate in the hands of the individuals who took the assessment and were applying for the Global Seal. And keep in mind that all of this is based on once the assessment is taken, we have to make sure that all of the levels of language, both those productive areas of speaking and writing, and those comprehension levels, or those that ability to understand the language, that all of those reach that minimum level to for each of the different types of fluency: the functional fluency, the working fluency, and the professional fluency. So we have to take a minute in there to make sure that when the score report comes out, that the candidate, that the applicant is eligible for one of the layers of one of the types of certificates. Some other questions that came in are, can we offer the test to volunteers? They also, I'm tying that to a similar question about, is there, an age range for the test?
I'll answer the age question, and you
Yeah.
can handle the other part. How does that work? So
Sure.
there isn't an age range. We have seen some students as young as middle school qualify for our Functional Fluency Award. They often might be at a higher level in some skills, but generally to write at that sort of complex paragraph, sort of supportive length with complexity, that tends to be a little bit more 7th, 8th grade and beyond.
Okay.
So writing is usually a lower skill for those students until they get a little more maturity academically.
And related to the volunteers, because these assessments can be taken by adults at any point, and we'll have those mechanisms available by summer for individuals to be able to take these tests. Yes, absolutely, the volunteers, we consider you part of our network. And so it will be a little interesting how we track down a few of the pieces to make sure that we are verifying all of the requisite information. So you may have to go back to your high school counselors and get a copy of that transcript with your SAT scores from whenever. But technically, yes, you are part of our network, and we want to make sure that if you're part of the AFS family, that we make these pieces available to you. So the next question came in to say, are the screens, I'm assuming that is the slides, will they be available later? Yes, we are recording this webinar, so you'll be able to see all of the slides as you watch and listen to the presentation at a later date. Is Duolingo app a good way to prepare and revitalize your language skills?
Well, it's certainly a way to prepare. I'm not sure it's necessarily as good as those interactive with native speaker suggestions that Jill had, but it certainly can build your vocabulary. Certainly you can help work on your pronunciation, and it's giving you just another layer of exposure. So obviously the real connection is always the more I think useful or practical one, and certainly the more pleasant one. It's interacting with a real person. But obviously, yeah, any app that's out there, I mean, if there's any way that you're using and doing something in the language is going to support your skill set. But if you can do something that will require you to actually kind of think on your own, and that's even better.
Okay, thank you. The next one asks, what is the time limit to pass the exam for the returnees? So I think, I don't know that there is a time limit. You know, really what we're looking at is, you know, have you maintained your language skills enough to be to the point of reaching one of the levels of fluency that matches up with the certificate levels? And so, you know, if it's been 1 year, if it's been 5 years, if it's been 20 years, if you are one of these, you know, individuals who answered in the poll that you are using your language skills on a weekly basis, that's a strong indicator that your language skills may have been maintained to the point that even if you traveled abroad 10 years ago or 20 years ago, if you're still using those language skills, you know, there isn't a time limit necessarily. So the question would be, can you track down a piece to help us have that English score to be able to verify that, like from high school and so on and so forth. And there are mechanisms that will work together with the Global Seal to make sure that even as adults, that this is very feasible for anyone to be able to achieve, because what we don't want is to put a lot of barriers in the way when you as an individual have worked so hard and you know, done such a great job at maintaining your linguistic fluency over however long it's been. So I see another question coming in asking about speaking both Italian with Italian clients and also having some functional ability to use spoken Spanish. Can I do both at once?
Well, you wouldn't take both tests simultaneously, but you could take one right after the other if you like. Yes, absolutely. We have a number of individuals that have earned multiple global seals. It's rare that their level is identical in each of the languages that they speak, which is one of the reasons why you would receive then an individual credential for each of the languages in which you test.
Okay, the next question is, how much does it cost for AFS partners? I'm not sure what we're referencing as an AFS partner, but if we're talking about how much does it cost to take one of the assessments, that's really the fee that is involved, is in taking one of those assessments to verify the language. Going to range based on which assessment you choose to. Harder to, I mean, you can take any of them, but what's interesting is them are not, Linda, what's the word I'm looking for? Accessible? No, accessible is not the word.
Well, that's part of it.
Yeah. So when an assessment is live. So if you're trying to plan ahead and budget, I would budget roughly $100. And it could be a little less, it could be a little more to get started, because to take one of these assessments as an individual, there has to be some monitoring happening to make sure that, you know, everything is honest and up to par, and that the individual taking the test is the one who's actually, their name is
We might have lost Lynn. Jill.
Yeah, I think she's freezing up. Oh no. Is there another question I can answer while we wait?
Jill, are you there?
She is not. I think we
Okay.
lost her.
Yeah, we lost her. I believe we have reached the end of our dedicated hour. So I would recommend to all the participants that are still there to send in their questions if they were not addressed. Linda, we thank you dearly for offering this course to our alumni. It's been a very valuable and illuminating hour. Thank you so much.